Hey guys, thanks for joining again this week. As you can see, I am not in my office. I'm in the studio, and we actually have my mom here with us this week, and we will be talking about family dynamics within addiction, a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now from my perspective and hers. So, I'm a little more nervous than I thought I was going to be. Yeah. I kind of wanted to start with a lot of what it was like. Not a lot of it, but I did want to go back and talk about what it was like. I think something that I've always tried to focus on, even within this series, and when I talk to people just about my recovery journey in general, the fact that, my addiction or my disease, if you will, started a long time before I picked up any substance, and a lot of it stemmed from behavioral issues. Right. So I kind of wanted to talk about that and some of my behavioral issues, and obviously I know what my perspective of my behavioral issues was, but I wanted to hear a little bit about it from you.
Well, early on, it was probably pre-school, or maybe early years of school, I was actually at a therapist, and you were there with me, and I didn't recognize it because you're my child, and I just assumed that that's how you are. But he pointed it out to me because during our 30-minute session, you had interrupted 12 times. And so he's the one who first told me that I should look into it. And you were officially diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, whichever you want to call it. And so we started off pursuing that. I put you on medications, and you had every side effect that the medication label says that somebody may have from taking a medication. That you had it. It was far worse dealing with you with the side effects, I felt, and you were so miserable all the time.
And that was second grade?
Yeah. And I just decided on my own, along with your teachers, who kind of felt like, you were okay, other than you were probably sick all the time. And in the nurse's office, that's probably my biggest memory of the medication process.
Behavioral issues wise?
Well, that was the first sign, yes. And then, of course, as you grew, the diagnosis grew.
The diagnosis.
Yes, from because we did get a lot of help. I did everything I could on my end to try to help with all of the issues, trying to get you through school, because everybody knew you were highly intelligent, but had a hard time honing your focus in. And so medication just was not an option for us, though. I know that. Looking back, I don't know how else I would have done it, but I feel like, we worked through it.
Okay. And then fast forwarding to middle school and beginning of high school, that's really when the behavioral issues kind of took on a new identity. That's a great word to describe it. I was very rebellious, to say the least. And our relationship was not good. We did not have a good relationship. And it wasn't for a lack of trying on your part.
Correct.
I'm able to recognize that today.
Yes.
But back then it was definitely a different story. And so for me, and I don't know if you would agree, but I believe, and I've said this so many times, if you refer to my first episode, we talked about a little bit of my addiction and my journey. And I often say that my first drug of choice was attention.
Yes.
And that was whether it was positive attention or negative attention. And I think that as I got older, I learned how to manipulate attention.
Yes.
So I would say that that's probably played a huge role in my behavioral issues, junior high and high school. So how did you cope with that stuff?
Ooh, I think I had a big support system in my mom, who I relied on a lot, and my mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law. So I had a lot of family support. I think everybody really helped out wherever shuffling was necessary. There was always somebody there to help shuffle you to this program, that program, which is what I spent most of your adolescent years, if you want to call it, doing, between therapy, treatment programs, just in general trying to keep you out of trouble. That's why when you talk about it, that's all I can remember is spending all of my time running you here, running you there. But you were my life. You still are my life. And it was really important for me to do everything on my end, knowing that someday you were going to come out the other side of it. And here you are.
I like that. I think for me, it's important to point out that, my mom and my dad did separate when I was very young. My mom raised my brother and I full time, and she worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. And amidst all of that, she talks about all of these different family members that came in. I can't even begin to talk about how grateful I am for the different family members. When she talks about people shuffling me from here to there, my grandmother, on my dad's side, who she said her mother-in-law, would pick me up. You've heard in my earlier episodes that I went through 3 different treatment programs in my adolescence. From the time I was 15 to the time I was 18, and she would pick me up. She lived in a completely different city, and she would pick me up, take me to the program, drop me off, and then come back and pick me up and take me back home later. My family really did do everything that they could, and although at that point in my life, my adolescence, I didn't get it, the seed was definitely planted, and I knew exactly where I needed to go when I needed help. And I think it's so important to talk about that because a lot of people, so there's 2 sides of this. A lot of people think that treatment doesn't work because it doesn't work the first time. But then you have your people who say that you have to go to treatment a few times in order for it to work. And I think that neither of those things are true. I think it just depends on the individual and what's going on, but it's also about family and having that support and maintaining boundaries. Moving on from my adolescence into my adult years, I didn't live with my mom as an adult, and she had to deal with, the height of my addiction from far away. So I definitely wanted to touch on that and just touch on the support of my family in that time as well, because the actual literal fact is, regardless of everything that happened and everything that I did, at the end of the day, it was my mother who showed up, and it was my mother who picked me up and literally out of the gutter that I was in and took me to where I needed to go to get to treatment. So we're talking about the height of my addiction, in my opinion, when things got really bad, when I hit my bottom. My mom also was caught up in that. We say all the time, addiction is a family disease, and it's the truth because the family gets wrapped up into everything that's happening as well. And even though I didn't live in her home with her, she's still, she's my mother. So she was caught up in it. So again, I just wanted to hear from you on some boundaries that you had and coping mechanisms.
Well, again, we're a long time on the other side. But when I think about that time, I think about my chest gets heavy and not being able to breathe for the most part. And the coping mechanisms, again, my family support. I have a great family support on my end as well that kind of helped me. I have great friends who were there for me and supportive. And a lot of people keeping in contact with people, even probably people you didn't know that were keeping in contact from afar. But I had to be at arm's length from you because I couldn't be in it completely. because again, I couldn't breathe away from you, so I for sure knew I couldn't breathe next to you. But just my family would be the biggest support system that I had. And as far as dealing with you, I just had to say no and do what I could, which I knew would help you, not enable you. And I know giving money was my biggest one. I just always had to say no to that. I will buy you food. I will put gas in your car, but I'm not giving you any money. And that was tough because that was always a fight for us on the phone. And, yeah, those days are really hard to dredge up when we talk about them, but I really like where we are today. They're the happiest times of my life. I got my daughter back pretty much 6 months in, I would say. The first 6 months were tough. You and I talked about this earlier, because as you said, sometimes I would look at you and go, are you high? But again, I just have to remember that there's still the isms that you talk about. And I would say that's probably the biggest thing for families to remember, that the first year is tough. You're still living it 100%, but not that we get along every day, but for the most part, you're my best friend. And I love that.
It's awesome. I also wanted to talk about, because we talked about boundaries, and you were saying that some of your boundaries were not giving me money. I think one of the things that I love about that part and everything that happened in that part, and that part was a period of like a week when I finally did surrender and submit to going to treatment. But that week was heavy, and there was a lot of stuff that happened within that week. But before that, what led up to that was a lot of me trying to manipulate and I was trying to get help, but I was like not really trying to get help. So I wanted to talk about that and what those phone calls sounded like.
It was, again, a lot of I need, you don't love me, that type of thing. And I just remember my responses being, I do love you, and when you're ready, call me. And it just was progressing, and I think you were getting in a lot of trouble. I mean, we were like on the brink. And I remember my last ditch effort, and I pretty much said no to money, no to anything. There was a lot of stuff that happened in between there, but that last week I just basically, my last straw to get you to come to the light or to the other side, is turning off your phone and telling you I'm here, and when you're ready, call me and I will be there with a U-Haul. I'll move you out of your apartment, but you have to find the treatment center. And that I did put on you, because then I knew if you actually found the treatment center, then you were going to be ready and you made the phone call. If you didn't. But it was still a challenge getting you to the facility. We had 3 or 4 days in the interim, and again sought out all of our support system, helping maneuver you from home to home in your madness, and me again having to stay away from you for the most part in that, because I definitely would have got beaten up big time in that emotionally.
Not physically.
Not physically, but emotionally, because you were really good at doing that to me, as do all children to their parents. But once you made that phone call, I knew you were ready. And that was probably the biggest relief. That's probably when I started to breathe. Even though I let you go for a couple more days to get it out of your system, I knew that you were going to go. I just knew.
So yeah, and I just wanted to reiterate some of the stuff that she was talking about when I was finally ready. It was a huge spiritual low. It was a huge bottom for me. My bottom, I feel like everybody's bottom looks different. And when I say bottom, we're talking about, you hear often, in order for people to get clean or to get sober, that they have to hit a bottom. So they have to hit this just complete breaking point. And a lot of people see a bottom and it's almost like there's a stigma that comes along with it, where it has to be where you're homeless and you're living under a bridge. And my bottom didn't look like that. My bottom was really, on the inside, it was a spiritual bottom. And on the outside, it looked like, I had been evicted from my apartment and I was sleeping on different people's couches and stuff like that. But I had been doing that for a while. So my spiritual bottom was really, I think, the biggest thing that happened for me, to where I no longer even knew who I was. And again, I talk about how I was in treatment as an adolescent, and really I had all of this knowledge of the fact that it was possible. I had all this knowledge of a life that I could live, and it kind of it came to a head where the pain of how I was living came together with the knowledge of how I could live, and that's when it became possible for me. And she talks about these phone calls and different times that we spoke. And the biggest thing was, and I don't know if you remember this, but you kept telling me that I would have to go to my grandparents' house.
Yes.
That if and when I was ready, I would go to my grandparents' house.
Yes, because I knew that would be commitment right
Yeah.
there to go face grandma and grandpa.
Exactly. And I did not want to do it. And it was then when I said, fine, I'll go to grandma and grandpa's, that she showed up. And I think that that's something that I hold so close to me, is the fact that through it all, she set up boundaries. She cut off communication. She did what she had to do for her. And to me, whatever it looked like, she never lost hope. And she was there. She was there when it was time and when I was ready. And again, when I was ready is really when I was willing. Yes. And that's what it's about. It's about the willingness, and we talk about that a lot. And then, of course, something that she talked about was in the interim, if you've listened to my other videos, you'll know that I went to a state-funded treatment center, and that it's a waiting process to get into those. And that's why we talk about a sense of urgency and trying to get people in as quickly as possible, because if you listen to what she said, there was a waiting time in between when I was able to get into that treatment center. And even though it was a short window, it was enough time for me to decide that I needed to go back out. And I did. And luckily, I made it back, and I made it into the treatment center when I did, because I had family who was there and ready, and the car was waiting outside the door, ready for me to go. And she's the one who took me to treatment.
For parents who think that once their child is in treatment, that everything's going to be all better. Because I did get the phone calls probably 2 weeks in. I think that even though it was a state-funded program, the program you went to was a wonderful program for you. And of course, everybody's different. I'm not going to, deal with it the same way. But everything had to be, we had to give you goals. Like, let's talk again in 2 weeks and see how you feel in 2 weeks. Let's talk about it again in a month. And I think that's how they pushed you all the way to 5 months of being in that program. And for you that worked, but not everybody it's going to work. But it's still really ugly. There's still really dark times during that 5 month period, even though you're in rehab. But at least I knew you were safe and in a safe environment. And that's all you can hope for while you emotionally go through everything that you need to go through to come out on the other side. And you and I talked about it earlier, but from the time Nicole was little, I used to say to her all the time, because of all the challenges that we face, when she would really just stress me out and I didn't know how to respond to her any other way but to say, when are you ever going to learn that the world does not revolve around you? And she would just kind of look at me with, a gaze look in her eyes, because she had no idea what I was saying. And for me, knowing that she had achieved and come to the other side, we were sitting outside and having a conversation at the facility. And she looked at me with this look on her face and said, Mom, I finally know what you mean when you say the world doesn't revolve around me. I own my own shit today. Proud moment.
Yeah, it's, we talked about it. It's these little epiphanies, these little moments of clarity that I had, that I learned through going to treatment. I talk about it all the time. I'm not just an advocate for recovery. I am an advocate for treatment. I believe in treatment, and I believe in the power of going into an environment, a safe environment where you can get to know you and have supportive people around you, and wherever that is for you. Here, our programs are incredible because we have the dual diagnosis aspect, and we're able to look at everything mental health along with addiction. But not everybody has that ability, and it's just about being in a safe environment where you're learning about yourself, you're learning about the different things that make you tick, and you're learning coping skills and coping mechanisms. And when something does go wrong, I have a safe place to land at the end of the day because I'm in this bubble, this safe bubble. And like she talked about, it's funny that you brought that up because I forgot about that. And it's interesting, but that's exactly what they did. They would say, okay, well, let's see how you feel about this in a week, or let's see how you feel about it then.
Let's revisit this.
Yeah, because I remember that length of stay was a huge almost roadblock for me. It was really scary thinking about going to treatment for an extended period of time, taking me out of my, I guess you could call it a life. But it was frightening. It was frightening thinking about being in for longer than, even 2 weeks, let alone 5 months. And, but now I look back on it and I'm like, stay in treatment forever.
I wouldn't say forever.
Yeah.
But just remember that 30 days, is like baby steps. There's so much work to be done, even once that 30 days is complete, and just having faith and believing in your child.
Yeah. In the moment, it was a lot of, we had to work together. We talked about things like when I first got clean, she would say something or ask me, are you high? And that would hurt my feelings. And, the old me in my active addiction, I would fly off the handle when she accused me of being high. And that's because I was probably high. But now in this new instance, we had to learn how to navigate through that stuff together. So we would talk about it, and I would tell her, it hurts my feelings when you say that. And this is why, because I feel like I'm working at this. And how our relationship grew and how our relationship got better is because we learned how to communicate. First, I learned that A, I was the problem, and B, I was the only one that could fix my problem. That was me. And, with faith in a higher power, of course. And so it took me working on me and then being able to outwardly work on my relationship with my mom. And it was through little stepping stones like that. And learning, for me, I had to learn that all of this past hurt and everything that I had done wasn't just going to go away overnight. So when she said or accused me of being high, the reality of the situation is she had every right to. And of course, I didn't know it in the moment, it just hurt my feelings. But now, looking back, I understand now that, of course, she thought I was high. I was acting erratically, just how I acted when I was using. So it took a lot of work and communication to work through those different times. And like I said, it wasn't always rainbows and butterflies and sunshine. And even today, it's still not.
The first time I could breathe when you agreed, because I knew that you were going to get the help that you needed, because going into treatment is exactly where you needed to be, in an environment for you to obviously get sober, but get the help to work on you. And as an adult, that was probably the best thing that you could have done for yourself, was to get yourself help. And I think that was so important. And yes, I was, asking you to get help, but you making the decision that I'm done with this, man. I'm done doing this. Was key that made you so successful. But again, you had a lot of support behind you. Support is important.
So how did you prepare for me going into treatment?
I talked to Grandma and Grandpa and said, we need to house her. And, of course, spoke to all your family members, but I just knew that once you were there, I could rest. I mean, honestly, that was like the first time I probably got a good night's sleep during all of it, because you weren't in a safe environment. And you were going to get the help that you needed. I guess, it's kind of maybe not really a funny story so much for Nicole, but I also knew as her parent, in order for her to stay on the path and continue on, that I had to not be so available to you. And by that, I wasn't in my own home where you had somewhere to come and flop, if you will. And you went into sober living, which was amazing, which you didn't want to do. You wanted to come home, but I knew that wouldn't be the answer for you. But that was my boundary, I guess, I put up by saying, no, you can't come home. And that made you much stronger. And that's why you are where you are today.
That's good. I think that's a really good key is I think that so often parents want to help
continue to try to fix.
Right. And so they're like, yes, of course you can come home. I can't tell you how much being, I guess you could say, forced to learn how to live on my own really helped me. And I mean, it's not to say I didn't live with her from the time I was 18 on, but I had many, many family members where I would just kind of bounce around and do my own thing. And then, there's that whole got married at 19 thing. That's always fun. But even still, we lived with his parents. Like I always had a fallback. So leaving treatment, obviously my instant reaction is like, oh, I want to go home and be with my mom. But I love that she was like, no, that's not what's going to happen. You need to find somewhere to go. And that forced me into a sober living, which is, something that I always recommend. It's sort of like that halfway step between treatment and reality, if you will. There's that added layer of accountability. For me, that's really what sober living was. I went to outpatient 1 day a week, and really in the back of my head, I was like, this is my fallback. If ever I was put in a situation where I was tempted to use, I could say either no to myself or no to whoever was offering it to me, because I had to test because I was an outpatient. And it seems really silly, but that worked for me. It worked for me for a really long time, having that extra layer of accountability on top of going to meetings and having a sponsor and doing everything that I was supposed to be doing as far as working with steps, as far as working a program.
Well, I think the other thing too, it's also a big reality for you to realize at that time that it's not a perfect world, that you've got to work through ups and downs every day, day in and day out. It's not, again, like you said, rainbows and
butterflies.
Yeah. And that's probably the biggest challenge for most people that are using, because they aren't growing up, they're hiding, they're masking with using, is to take on the reality of the world. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. It's always going to be hard.
Yeah.
But working through it is huge.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories from when I got clean was the first time I went grocery shopping. I cried. I was overwhelmed. I had never done that before. I'd never done it before clean. And I'd never done it before where I was looking for like healthy things, like produce. I didn't understand how all that worked. The little baggies and weighing it. I didn't get all of that. So yeah, I love what you said about adjusting to the real world, and sober living, IOP, all of that stuff is definitely an incredible tool in order to be able to do that. So out of sober living, in previous videos I've talked about relationships in recovery. in dealing with stuff like that. And I want to talk about, we've talked about big decisions in recovery, like big life decisions. And one of my big life decisions, which affected my mom, and we had to, go through this process together in recovery, was my big move from the state of California to Tennessee.
Huge.
Yeah. So,
it was difficult for me as your mother, just because you were a 5-hour plane right away, and I couldn't come rescue you, even though I wouldn't have. But in my mind, but I had faith for sure, and you were so sure about it. But I, again, as a parent, we always want to protect our children. But letting them go and fly on their own is the best thing that we can do for our children.
Was there any fear that you had, like in regards to my recovery in particular? Yeah.
That's what I mean, for sure you were going to be in a new place, not know anybody, and how easy would it be to turn, to that. But being that you were coming to work for American Addiction Centers was a plus, because it still kept you in it every day. And to this day, I believe it's a huge part of your recovery. Just working in it as well as living it has made you who you are.
So our relationship today, and I really, we're able to sit here and talk and laugh together, but I really just want to make sure that you understand that our relationship in my addiction, in my adolescence, and even into junior high, it was very, very toxic. I was very disrespectful. I was very disobedient, and she did everything that she could. And of course, at that time in my life, I don't see any of that. I just see she did not want me to have any fun, obviously.
Yes. She didn't life.
Exactly. She was just trying to ruin my life. And today it is only because of recovery, and she will say the same thing. It is only because of recovery and the 12 steps in these programs and going to treatment that we have the relationship that we have today. I mean, absolutely. I'm a completely different person. Completely different person. And
I love who you are.
I love you too. And it's a beautiful thing. And we still learn and we still grow. There's still things, that we talk about today. Either when it was during that time or, during these times, the latter years in recovery, which is really not even the latter years, because I'm not that far up there yet. Yeah. But even having a few years in recovery, being able to learn together and grow together. It's a family disease, which means that it's a family recovery process as well. And I think that what helped so much with our recovery process is that she was open to that, and she understood that as well. And she knew that there was going to be work that she had to put in as well. Even though it wasn't her responsibility, because I'm an adult and I make my own decisions, she did that because she wanted the relationship with me as well.
100%.
So do you have any advice or any words of wisdom that you would share with mothers or family members seeking help for their loved ones or dealing with this?
I don't know if you want to call it advice, but I'll say what worked for me, again, was going through the process, getting all of the education, learning everything I could, being open to seeing myself in it as well as my child, and never giving up. Never giving up hope is huge, but also setting boundaries is huge. And just know that there's help out there, and that just because they go get help doesn't mean they're going to be that perfect child the next day.
Thanks so much for joining my mom and I this week. It was awesome to have you here. Please remember that I am not a licensed professional. I do not have any fun letters behind my name. I do not have any certifications. Neither does she. I'm just an addict in recovery, here to share my experience, strength, and hope. And she's just the mother of an addict, here to share her experience, strength, and hope. And we're so grateful that you decided to tune in today. If you have any questions or comments for us, please leave those below. We'd love to take some time to answer those for you. And also, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. You'll get notified immediately of any new videos that come up.